this collection of videos, we are going to write our first ever program in our Introduction to Computing course using the Python programming language. And the program we'll be creating today is going to be focused on learning to use the print function and talking a little bit about the input function in Python. And we'll be using this print function to create some beautiful ASCII art. So let me tell you a little bit about ASCII art. This is a picture that we can have printed to the computer screen entirely made of characters or keystrokes that we could input from the keyboard. So we're building this artwork out of what's called the ASCII character code. And over here is a picture of what a character is. And really in your head, for a character, you ought to picture a button you could push on your computer. So the number 1 would be a character, this capital S would be a character, these quotation marks would be a character, because they're all buttons that I could push on my keyboard. And in the beginning of computers, before we had beautiful computer graphics, we made art like tanks and trucks and frogs, dragons, and even birthday cakes out of just print statements and characters we could input into the computer from our keyboards. And so that's what we're going to be working on today. But before we get started on creating our specific piece of ASCII art, I want to talk a little bit about some of the syntax of the Python programming language, and I want to get us started in Repl. So I'm going to open up a new web browser, and I'm going to go to repl.it. And I'm already logged in, and what I would like to do is make a new Repl. So I'm going to hit this button, this blue plus sign right up here, to create a new Repl. Remember that this website, repl.it, allows you to program in lots of different programming languages. So we'll need to select Python for the language we'll be using. And then it likes to come up with sort of a silly name for what your project might be. If you'd like to name your project something that's a little bit more descriptive, you can type that in. And then hit Create Repl. That brings us to the main frame of our IDE, where we have our text editor over here on the left. We've got our compile button right here, and when we type some code into the text editor and then run our code, the output of our program will be displayed over here on the right. So the function we want to get comfortable with before we begin our ASCII art is Python's print function. So I come over to my text editor and I type in print. And immediately, remember that an IDE tries to help us out with understanding the syntax of our programming language. So this little helper function pops up telling us, yes, I understand the word print. And if you're using the word print inside of Python, then to complete this function, you need to have parentheses, you need to have a value to print, and that can continue for some line. And then these things towards the end are what are called optional parameters. They're something we'll definitely cover throughout the course, maybe a little bit today, but we don't need to worry about them just yet. Also note that if I want even more information about the print function, I can come put my cursor and hover over the word, and it tells me even more information about that print function. And if I want it all to go away, I can just hit enter on my keyboard. So what I'm going to do is put print. I'm going to need parentheses here. Notice something that just happened. I went to my keyboard and all I did was open the parentheses with a left parenthesis. Python immediately added for me the closed parenthesis. There's a general trend in about all of computer science that anytime you start something, you also need to stop it. Every left parenthesis needs a matching right parenthesis. Every left quotation needs a right quotation. Things need to start and stop. That's a common trend in lots of programming languages, and our IDE is set up to auto-complete things for us so that we don't ever forget one of those things. That's a syntax rule of our programming language, so if we were to ever forget to close a parenthesis or match up a left with a right, not add a second quotation mark to what we're doing, we would get an error when we try to run our program. So it's there to save us from having compiler errors, and it's another way that IDE is helping us out. Returning to our print statement, we need to type something in between the parentheses. And what we need to type is what we want Python to print to the screen over here after we hit the run button. Now, we want to think of the print function as though our computer is talking to us. And if we think about it in that way, then we need to use quotation marks when we say, what do we want the computer to print? It's almost like the computer is a character if we were writing out the English language, and the thing between the quotation marks is what the character is saying. So let's just have our computer print for us, hello world. Look carefully over here. Our cursor is sitting right here at this little red arrow. Nothing has happened yet because we haven't hit the run button on our computer. So let's go ahead and push that and see what happens. Hello world was printed, and one thing worth noticing is that the quotation marks and the word print and the parentheses, all of those things exist over on the left-hand side in our text editor, but they do not exist here. Print is a word just for the computer to understand. The parentheses are part of that print function, and the quotation marks are kind of a start typing here and a stop typing here marker. So it doesn't print the quotation marks, but it prints everything that's in between the quotation marks. And that's one thing to notice. The other thing to notice is that the cursor is now on the next line. Whenever a print function is completed, the cursor will automatically move to the next line. So if instead of printing hello world in one print statement like this, if I would have print hello and gone to the next line in my text editor and then asked the computer to print world, what would happen when I hit run is that they would split and they would no longer be on the same line.